A very good morning. This presentation is brought to you by Resonate International with a mission to leverage knowledge worldwide. The topic being covered is the human impact of inaction, weak institutions, struggling leadership, and a silent majority. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world teetering on the brink of multiple crises, public aspirations for peace, justice, and human dignity have never been greater. Yet, the institutions designed to safeguard these ideals are failing at an alarming rate. From Ukraine to Middle East, to Africa's war-torn battlegrounds and conflict zones, to silent public suffering in these and other places around the globe, the voices of millions, particularly the young, are drowned out by political indecision, institutional paralysis, and a leadership void. The tragic outcome is the loss of so many young, precious lives all over, the erosion of public trust, and the weakening of global stability. The question arises, are institutions failing the public, or are leaders within these structures making diplomacy redundant? And what about the media, whose role it was to stand as the public's voice and hold power accountable? These questions must be asked today as humanity faces a crossroads. We either address these systemic failures now, or we will be forced to pay an even heavier price, one that could take generations to recover from. In this context, there are 5 key areas to look at. Let's take the first. Institutional paralysis, when governance fails the people. Public trust in global institutions is at a historic low today. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer 2023, less than 30% of the population across major democracies believe that their institutions are acting in their best interests. International institutions, regional bodies, and various other alliances and associations have become slow-moving bureaucracies, often incapable of addressing rapidly evolving situations and crises. For instance, the deadlock in the UN Security Council has allowed conflict zones to spiral out of control despite urgent calls for intervention. The failure to prevent or resolve the ongoing conflicts raging in various parts of the world, which has already claimed hundreds of thousands of lives so far, with no end in sight on both military and civilian casualties, and mass displacements and other sufferings in the process, exemplifies institutional inertia at its worst. The second context point is the democracy dilemma, short-term thinking versus long-term stability. One of the main challenges facing democratic governments today is the short-term thinking imposed by electoral cycles. In democracies, leaders are constrained by public opinion, opposition politics, and pressures to win the next election, often resulting in thus reactive rather than proactive governance. Decision making is dedicated or dictated by the need to satisfy immediate concerns such as economic stability or public safety, and at the expense of long-term strategic planning. This compulsion to govern for the moment often prevents leaders from tackling deeper systemic issues such as conflict resolution, global inequality, and climate change, which require sustained commitment and long-term vision. Take for example, ongoing conflicts and hotspots. Despite international outrage and countless peace initiatives, no meaningful resolution has been achieved. Short-term political calculations in Western democracies have prevented more sustained, decisive actions, while the authoritarian leaders continue to manipulate the situation to their best advantage. Such authoritarian regimes, free from democratic checks and balances and electoral pressures, can pursue long-term strategic goals without fear for immediate public backlash. This unchecked leadership can undermine diplomacy and exacerbate needless tensions around. While this allows for bold moves by such leaders, it often results in catastrophic consequences, as is being seen around. The absence of institutional checks, coupled with unrestrained power in such authoritarian regimes, makes diplomacy obsolete in an era where quick, decisive action is essential for peace. The third point in the context is the media's role, a watchdog on a leash. At this critical juncture, the media, once the beacon of accountability and public advocacy, has also lost its way. Media houses, which were expected to hold both institutions and leaderships accountable, have become entangled in sensationalism, corporate interests, and partisan agendas. Instead of distinguishing right from wrong and raising alarms over growing crises, many outlets are complicit in amplifying superficial narratives that distract from the core issue. For example, while social media platforms have amplified public discourse, much of it is now dominated by misinformation, disinformation, and clickbait. Traditional media's failure to provide deep investigative journalism on global crisis has allowed leadership failures and institutional decay to go unchecked, leaving the public uninformed about the ongoing human toll. The fourth point in the context is public voice, the silent spectator. As conflicts and crises multiply, the public, even in democracies, has become a silent spectator. With global economic challenges such as inflation, job losses, and rising costs of living, the general populace is consumed by their daily struggles, leaving little energy or opportunity to engage in pressing global matters unless they affect them directly. According to a recent Pew Research Center survey, over 60% of people across 19 advanced economies prioritize economic stability and personal well-being over engaging with global conflicts or crises. This economic preoccupation has left the field wide open for authoritarian leaders to act with impunity, while democratic citizens become increasingly detached from the global decision-making process. Public opinion, once a powerful force in shaping government policies, now barely registers in any global affairs as people struggle with their own day-to-day survival. The fifth point in the context is competency deficit, the hidden crisis of leadership. Underpinning all above four issues is this fifth one, a critical competency deficit, both in leadership and in institutional management. Many leaders today lack the training, expertise, or the foresight to navigate the complexities of modern governance. World Economic Forum data shows that over 60% of global leaders have no formal education in governance or in crisis management, which directly correlates with poor decision making in times of global instability. Authoritarian regimes, on the other hand, despite their freedom from public scrutiny, also suffer the same competency deficit, but their bold decisions made without thorough understanding of implications lead to aggressive postures that cause more harm than good to even their own citizenry. Such leaders, without the necessary skills, shall be gambling only with global peace. To resolve these issues, we need to prioritize competency-based leadership. This means investing in global leadership academies where individuals can be trained in diplomacy, governance, ethics, and long-term planning. A more educated and competent class of leaders can restore the balance between short-term electoral needs and long-term global stability. The path forward, of course, is of accountability, competency, and public voice. If we have to stop the current slide into chaos, we must start by demanding accountability from institutions and leaders alike. Institutions like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization must be reformed to be more agile and responsive with leadership that is more diverse and more competent. The veto system at the UN Security Council, for instance, must be overhauled to prevent deadlocks that leave global crises to fester. At the same time, the media must reclaim its role as the public's watchdog. Through investigative journalism and a renewed commitment to truth, the media can expose the failures of leaderships and the institutions, driving thus reform and accountability. By amplifying public voices, especially through social media platforms, the media can rebuild the bridge between governance and the public. Finally, it is time for a global movement to educate and train our future leaders. By fostering competency in leadership, we can ensure that future generations are better equipped to handle the challenges of governance, conflict resolution, and diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the world today is at a tipping point where the failures of leadership and institutions are eroding public aspirations, and young lives are being lost to conflicts that should have been prevented. The silence of the public and the weakened voice of the media only exacerbates this crisis. Needed attention to meaningful and purposeful objectives for the good of humanity is thus being lost in this process. But all is not lost. We must demand accountability, foster competency in leadership, and reclaim the public voice through a vigilant media and social platforms. Only then can we begin to steer the world away from catastrophe and towards a future that truly honors the aspirations of humanity. Good luck, best wishes, and God bless.